Surely many of you have heard that plants don't necessarily need soil for healthy growth and development. Roots can absorb the essential nutrients for life directly from the water. This method of growing is called hydroponics. But recently we learned that there is an even more unusual and effective method of growing plants, where the roots are almost always in the air. This method is called aeroponics. We decided to set up these systems to grow the same plants on them and see which one is better and whether these complex methods are actually better than regular soil. So here's how it all works. In the hydroponic system, the pot with the plant is placed in the lid of a large bucket filled with nutrient solution. Next to it is a compressor that aerates the solution with air, allowing the roots to breathe. Aeroponics sprays roots with nutrients every 5 minutes. Here, every 5 minutes, a pump turns on that draws the solution from a small container. The solution goes into the bucket and is sprayed onto the plant's roots for 10 seconds. After that, it simply drips down the walls of the bucket back into the tank. With this method of growing, the plant's roots are constantly in moist air, which means they can breathe even more freely. And it takes very little water, which is why this technology is used on space stations, since delivering water to space is not cheap at all. For our experiment, we bought 3 special black buckets for soil, water, and air. The black color of the bucket is actually important. The pots should not let in light. After all, unlike leaves and flowers, plant roots prefer to be in complete darkness, and light rays can easily kill them. Let's start with the simplest. Let's make a regular flower pot. We poured 2 bags of expanded clay at the bottom of the first bucket. These are lightweight clay balls. They are needed so that if we pour too much water into the pot, it can drain to the bottom without flooding the soil. On top of the expanded clay, we poured 30 liters of universal soil from the garden store. It's not so simple with the 2 remaining buckets. First, we made the hydroponic system. To do this, we drilled a hole at the very bottom of the bucket with a special drill and screwed in a fitting like this one. After that, we put a clear hose on it, with the upper end inserted into a loop made from a cable tie. Now we can easily drain the old solution from the bucket and without opening the lid, see the level of the solution inside the bucket. At the very top of the bucket, we made 2 more holes, this time small ones. Air hoses will be coming through them to the bottom of the bucket. We installed a flexible aquarium diffuser on their ends. The more air the roots get, the better it is for them, so we bought a really powerful compressor. For one of these buckets, you need a compressor that pumps at least 100 liters of air per hour. It says here that it can pump 3200 liters, and it can also be adjusted. This compressor is definitely what we need. The hydroponic system is almost ready. Now let's move on to the second bucket. We also drill a hole at the bottom and screw in a similar elbow, but this time with the end facing outward. For aeroponics, we bought a special pump, a sturdy plastic hose, a filter, a timer, and 5 nozzles for spraying water. For the solution, we got this container, which we covered on all sides with reflective material to prevent algae from growing inside, which could clog the filter and absorb nutrients. Next, we assembled the system itself. After cutting about 40 centimeters of hose, we connected the pump and the filter, through which the solution will be drawn in. After that, we cut the hose into equal lengths and sequentially connected all the sprayers. And in the last one, we inserted this special plug, which came with the kit. We placed this garland in the bucket and pulled the end of the hose outside. After that, we evenly glued each nozzle to the walls of the bucket in a spiral. Even though there's no soil in aeroponics and hydroponics, you still need to plant the seeds somewhere. For this, there are these mesh cups. A hole is cut in the lid of the bucket, and this cup is tightly inserted into it. After that, some substrate is poured into the cup, and the seed is planted there. Oh right, speaking of seeds, it's better to germinate them before planting. For this, we took hydrogen peroxide, a bit of water, a piece of cotton, and a petri dish. For the experimental plant, we decided to grow a very early maturing Japanese watermelon. We add a few drops of hydrogen peroxide to warm water so the seeds can get rid of any possible bacteria. Their immunity will increase, and the sprouts should become more viable. We soak the cotton with the seeds in water, cover it with plastic wrap, and make a few holes in it. To germinate seeds, you need 4 factors: warmth, darkness, air, and moisture. So we left the petri dish in a dark, warm place for 3 days. While the seeds were germinating, we did the most important thing in this experiment. We prepared the nutrient solution. We started by setting up one of the 2 necessary devices. This is pH meter. It measures the acidity and alkalinity of the water, which is a super important indicator for plants. These 3 packets were needed to calibrate our device. We took turns dissolving the contents of each packet in distilled water and placed the pH meter in them. It could remember what to compare the pH of our solution against. After each measurement, we rinsed the device with distilled water. We bought quite a lot of fertilizers, and the next step was to calculate the right recipe for our plant. Watermelons, as it turns out, prefer to eat the same things as pumpkins, cucumbers, or zucchinis. We chose a cucumber solution and used a special calculator to figure out how many grams of each substance we need. In the end, we managed to calculate the required ratio of elements with these fertilizers. We measured out a 50-fold amount of each of them and dissolved it in water in 5 identical bottles. We ended up with 5 bottles of concentrated solution for each of the fertilizers. Take a little liquid from each bottle and mix the solution in the correct order. The order is crucial because fertilizers dissolve differently. An incorrect order may leave residue. We poured a cup from each bottle into the hydroponic bucket and then the aeroponic container. Besides main elements like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, plants need trace elements such as iron, copper, and zinc. We took a cup from each bottle and poured them one by one, first into our hydroponic bucket and then into the aeroponic container. By the way, in addition to the main elements from the fertilizers, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, plants really need trace elements, such as iron, copper, zinc, and other metals. They were all sold in one small bottle with trace elements. We also added them according to the watermelon's preferences. When the solution was ready, we measured its acidity, and it was around 6 pH. Most plants fully utilize nutrients when the water pH is between 5.5 and 6.5. So our water was within the normal range. Next, we need to check the concentration of the solution. For this, there's a separate device that uses electricity to measure how much salt is dissolved in the water. In our solution, it showed 900 ppm, which means 900 particles of fertilizer per million particles of water. Watermelons need up to 1500 ppm, but since we don't have a big plant yet and only a little sprout is coming up, we thought that this concentration would be enough. In the room, we set up a corner for the plants and covered it with reflective material. We placed our 3 buckets there and checked that all the systems were working as they should. We were most worried about the aeroponics since it's the most complicated system. But everything was working perfectly, and finally, we reached the moment of planting the seeds. In 3 days, 3 out of 4 seeds sprouted, so it seems one was bad. When planting seeds for these growing methods, you need to use a material that retains moisture well, while also allowing air to pass through, like these mineral wool plugs. After squeezing out the excess water from the plugs, we sanitized our hands with alcohol, and very carefully, trying not to damage the little roots, moved the seeds into the plugs. And next we need expanded clay again. We poured a little into the mesh cup, placed a cap with a seed on top, and carefully filled the remaining gaps with expanded clay pebbles. Now the plant will be securely anchored in its pot. In hydroponics, the cup should hover above the solution, not touching it. Bubbles moisten the pot's bottom, and moisture travels through clay to the seed. This prevents early rot and encourages root growth towards nutrients. A bit of substrate shields the sprout from light. This way, the plant will not rot in the early stages of growth and will strive to quickly release roots to reach the nutrient solution. We place substrate from a neighboring pot on the seed to shield the sprout from light. Alternatively, plant the seed directly in soil without mineral wool. To ensure uniform conditions, we used this method and watered the area, encouraging watermelon roots to spread for moisture. But to ensure that all the seeds have the same conditions, we did it this way, after which we poured a couple of liters of water around the planting area. This is how you should do it, so that the roots of this watermelon have the incentive to spread out in search of moisture. It's also recommended to water the pots with expanded clay for at least the first few days, as there might not be enough moisture to kickstart the growth. To reduce water evaporation and create a greenhouse effect, we covered each watermelon with a plastic cup. Now all that's left is to turn on the light. And we bought this kind of light. This is a 600-watt sodium lamp for growing plants. Almost the same ones are found in the old yellow street lamps. Its light spectrum is very well suited for photosynthesis, but it needs some time to warm up and shine at full strength, just like the sun at sunrise. In just a minute it was shining like this, and after another 3 minutes it was almost painful to look at, almost like the sun. For the first few days we decided not to set a timer for the light so it would shine around the clock. The lamp heats our little garden quite well, and the tiny sprouts really need warmth and don't need the night too much.
The first sprout emerged within a day. It was a watermelon in a pot with soil. Hydroponic watermelon sprouted, aeroponic watermelon emerged, and the very last one, a few hours later, started to emerge. The watermelon growing in aeroponics. And we managed to capture a time-lapse video of this process. After 5 days, it produced its first real leaf, and right after that, the second one followed. And despite the fact that the sprout in the aeroponics was the last to sprout, after 5 days it was the largest of all 3 plants and managed to grow such a long root. The hydroponic watermelon was not far behind in this regard. Well, we can't see the roots of a watermelon on the ground. We're already preparing the second part of this video about all the challenges that awaited us later, our mistakes, and their solutions. We really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so we can make even more videos like this.